وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا صلى الله عليه وسلم عبده ورسوله. So inshallah my discussion will be very short inshallah, and it will be on just haya as a whole, like what is haya, and it connects to Uthman ibn Affan, but in general it'll just be on what is haya as a whole, right? So Ibn Umar, so the son of Umar radiallahu anhu, he reported that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that indeed modesty and faith come together, right? It's like iman, and if one of the two is missing, so is the other. So if you have iman, inshallah you should have taqwa and haya, and if you have haya, you should have iman with it, right? Also narrated from Rasul is that haya is it's a part of iman. Iman has how many parts? 70, and one of them is haya, right? So the first thing that comes to mind when you hear haya, right? Usually, especially for those who are born and raised in this country, the only way haya is really used in this country is clothing. That's the only way you'll ever hear haya. You know, and it's always about the woman as well, right? The women today, they have no haya, you know, and you hear this among the shabab nowadays. You guys, you're not on the campuses and stuff. So subhanAllah, this is what occurs, right? It's always the men, like the women have no haya, right? And there's no doubt that there's shortcomings on their side, but there's also shortcomings on the side of the men, both young and old, and in this country or outside of this country. And it's very important that we focus on this as well. So while we often like to talk about the women and their hijab and their, and their haya and their makeup and whatnot, we have to talk about the men, right? So many Muslim men, they will find them, for example, they go to like the gym, or they go to the beach, right? Or even they're just going to like school, right? But like you see what they're wearing, and they're wearing shorts that do not cover their awrah, for example. Or they're not properly covering the awrah at the beach. Even though, respectfully, in this country, you should not be going to the beach anyway, but that's okay. Let's say you go to halal beach somehow, right? You should still cover your awrah, right? Somehow, if any of you know, please let me know.
Fajr at the beach, that's the halal beach. Fajr at the beach.
Fajr at the beach? Yeah, there's no one there at Fajr. If any of you know a fully halal beach, let me know, inshallah. I'll be the first to come. But, for example, we wear like tight clothing, for example, really tight, exposed, like awrah on our private parts, right? And this is not appropriate, right? Because oftentimes men like to, this and that, and this problem and that problem. The shabab, not just the young people among the men, the young men, and they forget themselves, right? They don't do any introspection, like, okay, am I applying what I'm supposed to as well? And obviously, may Allah bless some people who do introspection, like we think about ourselves first before we go on ahead and start talking and advising others, right? So haya is not just modesty in clothing though, right? So even though, again, especially in the US, like that's just the one way they use the word. Haya means clothing, right? Oh, you have no haya, you have haya, this and that, right? But it's not just clothing, right? Haya is shyness in every regard, right? Think of it as like as a manifestation of your taqwa, right? So you have taqwa in your heart. How does that show? It's haya. And haya encompasses everything that comes as a result of taqwa, right? And that just means that you're righteous, right? You're devout to the deen, and you make sure to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every action. Like you keep Allah in your mind for every action. And ask Allah to make us among these people, because we're very far from that. So it's character, and it's your speech, it's the way you deal with the people, the facial expressions you make, right? It's the things that you say and you do and you wear, right? And all these, even the jokes that you make sometimes, and what you do both in private and public. This is all part of the haya, right? And alhamdulillah, we have iman. We're at the masjid, right? So I hope we're all Muslims. If not, then, Allah can do that person. But inshallah, we're all Muslims. So having the iman is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's a ni'mah, And so we should have some humility to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who was so merciful to bless us with this. Because we see many people he didn't just give them ignorance, right? Allah gave them ignorance with arrogance, right? So these people, you try to advise them about the haqq of Islam. Not only are they ignorant of Islam, they're arrogant upon their ignorance, right? So Allah didn't, Allah took both of these away from us and gave us iman and taqwa. And so we should strive to have everything that is encompassed by iman, right? Which is haya. Okay, so Uthman radiallahu anhu, he was gifted with this. That even the angels and the Rasul they were aware of this gift of haya, which is development to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That even the Rasul said that modesty is a part of faith, and the most modest of my ummah is Uthman radiallahu anhu. Right? And this modesty didn't just mean clothing. Because I don't think any Sahaba were wearing shorts or going to the beach, right? So all of them wore proper clothing. So it's not just clothing, it's their devoutness, it's their qiyamul layl, it's their lowering the gaze, it's all these things, all these come under obedience to Allah, which is haya. Right? So how can we have them? So as I said, the general idea is to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's haya, right? That you understand that all of this is everything you have is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you should obey Him in every regard. And we should do jihad and nafs and do our best, because it's not possible to get 100%, but as close as we can get, inshallah. Right? So I already mentioned clothing, that's part of it. Another part is interacting with the opposite gender, right? And this is very, very important for men. And going to college, Allah musta'an, right? Oftentimes, we have a lot of failures in this regard. So and something that's important to understand in many cultures as well is that cousins are also maharim. So just as any random girl in your class is, so is your cousin. They're equivalent as far as Islam is concerned, right? There's no, but she's my cousin. The same thing. So I'm gonna go into what that means, but that's a preface, because in all of cultures they say, oh, but she's your cousin, stop being weird. Islam does not care about that, right? So the Rasul, he mentioned that for a nail of iron to be driven into the head of one of you, so imagine when you smash a nail onto the wall, if that was into your head, it would be better than to touch a woman who was not lawful for him, right? And so it's important that we keep in mind that we don't sacrifice the deen for the sake of the dunya, for the sake of being Americans and assimilating into this great culture, right? That we hold on to the deen. We do not shake hands with women, and among the interactions as well with women who are not related to us is we don't go beyond what is necessary. Let's say they're invited to your house, gathering, say salam, and that's it, right? Out of courtesy. That's maximum as far as it should go. Maybe however that's it, right? But for example, in the college, there's no joking, there's no laughing, there's no sitting down and eating lunch together, right? There's none of that. This is not permissible at all, right? And this is very important to keep in mind. There are boundaries. Everything is only as needed. So if there's interaction that's necessary, that's fine. So for example, the Muslim Student Association, for the brothers and sisters on the board, okay, they're gonna have to meet as a group with each other, not alone, not secluded, not one guy, one girl, but as a group, and they have to meet regarding the matters of the Muslims at the college, right? And I'm gonna mention a story from the daughter of Imam Malik, right? Right? So one time, it's recorded that Imam Malik would review his books with his students, right? Imam Malik would have his students, right? They carried on his madhab. And so his daughter also learned under Imam Malik, right? She also learned knowledge, and she learned from Imam Malik. She's his daughter, right? So whenever he was reviewing with his student, just like we review Quran, the scholars would review their books. As he's reviewing with his student, his daughter would be, for example, behind a corner, so the student doesn't see her. Right? Okay, let's say the student makes a mistake and Imam Malik doesn't catch it, for example. Or it didn't come to mind immediately. But his daughter catches it. What would she do? Would she say, oh, he made a mistake? Or would she correct it out loud? And what would she do? She would what? She would just tap on the wall, and Imam Malik would be alert and say, oh, what I miss? Right? So, obviously in this country it's a little tough, right? And obviously for us, that doesn't mean you don't talk to women at all in your class. If a girl comes up to you after a test, you say, oh, look at that. You don't do that, right? But we have to understand that there are boundaries, and we should do our best to stick to it, right? So, for example, we just keep it to a minimum. I mean, I've had situations where a non-Muslim woman, they come up to me, how was the exam? I said, alhamdulillah. It was good. I don't say alhamdulillah, I say it was good. Don't try and drag the conversation. You see a lot of non-Muslims, they do that. They try and kind of get the most out of the talk, get their fun. And if this is for the sake of Islamic knowledge, which is the case of Imam Malik's daughter, what about the case for like college or the and dunyawi, like stuff that has to do with the dunya, that's less important, right? What do you call it? Another point is the content of the interactions themselves, right? So this is obviously the opposite gender has more stringent restrictions, but let's say just among like guys or among like your group of young friends, among your family, for example, right? What's important, part of haya is to watch what you say, right? The Rasulullah, whenever he would speak, right? Something good and a benefit and a value would always come out. You would never see him talking about like something useless, like I don't know, something silly, like we have to
game.
About game. Oh yeah, about video games, right? You want to see him talking about video games, yeah, you talk about something that's beneficial, right? And so when we talk, we should have this like, and this is shyness from Allah, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we know Allah is watching us. So why would I spend like our words are recorded by the angels, right? So why would I spend my words and the time that I have that's recorded to speak about things that are irrelevant or things that are not important or things that are bad? Sometimes like we're doing ghiba, we're backbiting people and we're do you know this person? Like Sheikh mentioned this, like this is part of speech that we should stay away from. And Rasulullah he said the believer does not insult others, he does not curse others, and he's not vulgar and he's not shameless, right? So he's not vulgar is very important. A lot of Muslims they curse sometimes, and they say, it's not that bad of a word. I have a Muslim friend, subhanAllah, none of you know him, inshallah. He uses the N-word a lot. And I advised his brother, like, this is not permissible, He's like, no man, no, it just means bro. Like, it depends on the context, right? And I was like, that's not how it works. And he's Muslim, subhanAllah, right? And he's not like ignorant of the rulings of the deen either. He's, mashallah, he has a beard, and he prays, subhanAllah, right? It's like, no, it's just the context. It just means bro, right? And this hadith mentioned as well, the believer does not insult others, curse others, etc., etc. He's not vulgar. Allah does not mention a specific time or case. This is in general, right? And part of this is also avoiding inappropriate jokes and like mocking other people. So I've been part of many group chats with young Muslimin, subhanAllah, and some of the stuff these guys send each other is kind of crazy. Like it's like they see like an Instagram reel and they send it to each other, and like, this is so funny. I'm gonna be 100% honest. I don't think some like non-Muslims would send this to each other. Like that's how like disgusting some of this stuff are. They send it to each other and they think it's funny. And, like a'udhu billah. We should have like better akhlaq than this. Like we have the example of Rasulullah and then some believers don't, right? So we should really be closer to that high level of adab and like not sending these sorts of things to each other. It's very bad, honestly. So this is something that we should keep in mind. Right, and the last, what do you call it? So just the last few notes I want to mention as well is lowering the gaze, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He commands this for the men before the ayah for the hijab comes down. So there's no doubt that this is also fun, right? It's conditions and whatnot, but the ayah, in the order of the surah, the ayah about men lowering their gaze comes first, right? So, again, as I said, the young people nowadays, they like to complain, the woman this, woman that. Why are you looking? Right? And this is not an excuse for no hijab, by the way, because I've heard some sisters, they say, why are you looking that? Well, that's not how it works. Everyone has their fura'ah they have to fulfill, men and women for Allah, but men, what's fard upon the men is lowering the gaze, right? And keeping these boundaries when they interact, and it's important we do that, right? It's important we lower the gaze in all situations, right? Like even if it's just a woman walking on the street, or a woman going into the masjid, or like your teacher, right? Which is really hard sometimes, but you have to, right? So this is a ruling from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we have to obey it. And another thing is things such as they're very disgusting. Things like watching pornography or masturbation. These are also common among the youth, and this is a secular disease. This is an issue that only really the disbelievers should be dealing with because they have no moral compass. But unfortunately, obviously the shaitan has a very strong hold on the nafs, and it's seeped into Muslim homes as well. And I ask Allah to protect us from this.
Ameen.
So this is, and obviously young children, they're very susceptible to this. And it's very bad as well because you go to the doctor nowadays and they'll tell you it's normal, you know, and the age where it starts for both men and women is getting younger and younger. Like if you look at the studies, the average start is getting younger and younger. So ask Allah to protect our children and ourselves, right? So these are all, that is a prime example of violation of haya, right? Such as joking with a sister or a cousin, right? Not a mahram sister, as in like another a Muslim sister at like a college or something, right? So these are all violations of haya. Sending your friend a very interesting Instagram reel, very disgusting, some of them, but yeah, very interesting, right? These sorts of things, right? These are all violations of haya, which is shyness, right? And you're being shy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because Allah, like if you knew, like for example, your father, if you knew your father was watching you at all times, you would not like do half of the stuff you do. You would not send your friend that Instagram reel. You wouldn't like that. You know, you wouldn't take your time talking to the sister. You would end the conversation because you know your dad, for example, he's got like a drone over you. He's watching, right? So, but our parents are not watching, but Allah is watching, right? And we should fear Allah more than we fear our parents, right? Or like for example, failing to lower the gaze. Like, would we stare at that girl across the classroom if her dad is watching? I hope not. It'd be really weird if someone did anyway. But you know, like Allah is watching them, and so we should have this fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? You know, Allah is the one, like He created us and gave us rizq and He keeps us alive and He heals us and He guides us, and you know, everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so do we not have the shyness from Allah, like, you know, like, yeah, Allah gave me everything, so maybe I should, you know, be a bit more careful and, you know, like be more careful of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every regard. And even if I'm not doing anything, even if I'm doing something like, go back, for example, something neutral. Let's say I'm playing a halal video game, like Minecraft with no music, or like, those are halal, like, don't waste your time, but let's say you're doing something halal, you're doing work for school, you can turn it into like ibadah. You can do dhikr for school work, or for example, your jobs. A lot of like older people, they have to complain, oh, I have to go to work, I work so hard for this family, you know? Yeah, but think of your work as the ibadah, as a salat, right? Not the same, but for example, the fard upon the man is to provide for the family. So you working is fulfilling this obligation, right? So you can turn it into like every minute that you work, you're getting ajr from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's all about like the niyyah, the fact that you're being, you know, shy and conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So as like an overarching theme, right, is that, you know, haya itself is shyness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that He created us and He's watching us, that we should always apply it in all of our regards. And there are many manifestations of haya in our action, right? There's the traditional, there's the idea of clothing, the idea of interaction with the other gender, there's these where often modesty is used. But there's also modesty in the fact that, you know, shyness is perhaps a better translation, perhaps, right? Because you should, part of haya is to be shy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the sins, right? Because you know Allah's watching you, right? And sticking to the sunnah of the Rasul, right? You know, the shyness should be of a slave of Allah who has blessed them, and the one who sent Rasul, yeah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Rasulullah in Surah Al-Ahzab, 8:21, لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا. Right? So for us, you know, in Rasulullah is a good example, right? Like Rasulullah is a good example for us. And part of that example is his remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always. Like who should be doing, in theory, who should be doing more istighfar and more ibadah and more qiyam and more, like it should be us, not Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obviously, we can't get to his level because he's one of the anbiya of Allah. But like we should do our best to get there, right? Like, we should do our best to dhikr Allah like often, to like be kind with others, to not look at things we're not supposed to not say, do things we're not supposed to do, which is remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sticking to the sunnah. This is part of what haya is. And it's not befitting of us, right? But we want to call ourselves Muslim and say, we follow Rasulullah and we lack haya and shame. We lack shame in our actions, and we lack shame in remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that we do, right? Having some shame, like, you know, Allah gave me, like, you know, for example, my eyes, like, so I should not look at what's haram, right? Allah gave me my mouth, so maybe I shouldn't, you know, joke with that, like, sister, you know, in my class, right? You know, and so it's upon us to have the taqwa of Allah and to follow the Rasul and have haya in every moment and in every action. And often we should remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do His dhikr and strive in His obedience. Because, you know, indeed, if we spent every moment of our life, yani every second, from the second we came out of our mother, you know, may Allah bless our mothers, right, till the minute we die, right, it will not be enough. It will not, it's not going to be enough to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So we ask Allah to make us among those who are the saliheen and have haya and promote the haya among the people, because part of haya is to advise others to have some haya as well. Right? And to stick to the Quran and Sunnah. Right? And may Allah allow us to avoid any culture that may avoid us from following haya and the teachings of Islam, which is unfortunately a disease that affects many Muslims. Right? I'm from Egypt, so any Egyptian will tell you. So, right? Like don't think this is just a nab against the daisies, right? That's a problem. Huh?
What's wrong with Egypt?
I won't say it on the stage, but there are many issues, unfortunately. Allah يهدينا كلنا إن شاء الله. You know, واسمعهم والعصر إن الإنسان في خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Anything I said that is good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and anything that is wrong or bad is from myself and the shaitan. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك.